When Doctor Who magazine began in 1979, it had 2 different comic strips every week. One featuring the 4th Doctor, which I covered the recent collection of in a previous video, and a backup strip featuring various alien races who appeared in the show. This is the first of 2 collections of those backup stories. All the stories in this volume are written by Steve Moore, with art by David Lloyd, Paul Neary and Steve Dillon. First up, there is the Return of the Daleks. This is set on the planet Anhort, which was invaded by the Daleks many centuries earlier. The film producer Glax decides to make a movie about them, only for the real Daleks to hear about it and decide to invade again themselves. There is a bit of satire in the film industry to begin with, but by the end the heroes are uncovering what happened during the first Dalek invasion and using it to destroy them. There are some nice visuals of the Anhorts riding pterosaur-like creatures, which would be too expensive to replicate in the current show, never mind in the 70s. So it's a good fun story to start off with. Throwback, the Soul of the Cyberman, tells the story of Croton, a Cyberman who develops a conscience and ends up helping the humans who the other Cybermen are subjugating. It's fascinating to see this element of moral ambiguity. Normally in this era the Cybermen were treated as 100% evil and irredeemable, and it wasn't until the new series that we started to see Cybermen throwing off their programming. So this is well before its time. The artwork is not as good as before, with lots of thick black lines and not much detail, but the spaceships do look good, and the final panel where it looks like Croton is crying makes for a very effective ending. The final quest is just one part, and it feels like one of those future shocks from 2000 AD, just a short tale with an ironic twist at the end. It's about Katsu, a Centauran warrior looking for the ultimate weapon, who tracks it to a barren planet, only to discover it's actually a deadly plague, which kills him instantly. So not a bad little story. The stolen TARDIS is set on Gallifrey for a change. The hero is Plutar, who gets booted out of the Time Lord Academy purely because of his political beliefs, which seems really unfair to be honest. And he ends up becoming a TARDIS mechanic. Gallifrey is invaded by an alien called Silarg, who distracts the populace with a circus full of beautiful women and performing lions. They're easily pleased. He steals a broken TARDIS and takes it back to prehistoric Gallifrey, but in the end Plutar ends up foiling his plans. There's some great scenes of fighting dinosaurs, and it's always interesting to see more of Time Lord society, even though this is the Invasion of Time era without any of the mysticism or lore. K9's Finest Hour stars K9, which makes up for him not having a comic strip in his annual. It's another one-off, as K9 is teleported out of the TARDIS by a gang of space bounty hunters. They're really after the Doctor, but K9 manages to take them all down, as well as their robot. Unusually, the Doctor and the TARDIS are in this at the beginning and the end, but it's very much a throwaway installment all the same. Warlord of the Ogrons tells of a scientist, Dr. Leoprix, who travels to the planet of the Ogrons and experiments on one of them to increase his intelligence. Of course, it becomes too intelligent and ends up stealing his spaceship and leaving him to the mercy of the primitive Ogrons. It's all a bit predictable, but Steve Dillon's artwork is great. Death World begins as a story about ice warriors exploring a hostile planet, but halfway through the Cybermen show up, and it turns into a deadly battle between the 2 alien races. There are no humans involved, so it's hard to care which side wins, but it's a fun story, and would doubtless have inspired many children to play at Ice Warriors vs Cybermen in the playgrounds. Absalom Dark Dalek Killer was originally intended as a setup for its own spin-off title, where they wouldn't have had to pay the BBC for the rights to Doctor Who, but presumably they would still have had to pay for the rights to the Daleks, so I'm not sure how that would have worked. It's a definite highlight with a strong lead character, an amoral murderer with a death wish who just wants to kill every Dalek he can. There's a bit of a pulp sci-fi Edgar Rice Burroughs influence as he meets the scantily clad Princess Tyin, who inexplicably falls madly in love with him, which feels a bit dated, but in the end she dies tragically, leaving him even more determined to kill every Dalek he can. And again, Steve Dillon's artwork is excellent. Twilight of the Silurians tells of the last days of the Silurians ruling over Earth. It focuses on a scientist called Nagara, who does experiments on primitive apes until they rise up and kill him. So it feels weirdly similar to the movie Rise of the Planet of the Apes, but there's also some great scenes of Silurians riding dinosaurs. Ship of Fools brings back Croton from the second story. His ship is picked up by a cruise liner, which turns out to be stuck in a time warp. Croton manages to get them out of the time vortex, but then all of the passengers instantly age to death. It's another ironic twist ending. Apparently Croton comes back in the 8th Doctor comics, so I look forward to reading those eventually. The Outsider tells of a Centaurans called Scrant, or sometimes Scant, who travels to the world of Bractylis to conquer it, and an astrologer called Demimon, who allies with him for his own gain, only to strike him down when his daughter is threatened. Quite a simple story, but you do get to see an army of Centauran clones being born. Finally, there's the epic Star Tigers, 28 pages long. It follows on from Frontier in Space, bringing back the Draconians, who I always thought deserved more stories. They pick up a ship containing Absalom Dark and the corpse of his dead girlfriend, who he thinks can be brought back to life. But he's a total drunk now, so he might not be thinking clearly. He teams up with a Draconian prince, who has a high-tech spaceship. They head to a pleasure planet to pick up an ice warrior. Then a human called Mercurius. And finally have a battle with the Daleks. It's a bit of an anticlimax after all the build-up, and the Daleks only appear briefly, although that is explained in the back matter. But it's a strong storyline overall, especially the early instalments where Steve Dillon does the art. It definitely goes downhill a bit once David Lloyd takes over. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened if the story had carried on. It could have been like the equivalent of Blake 7, but in the Doctor Who universe. But I know Absalom Dark comes back in the main comic, and also the New Adventures novels, as well as a brief on-screen appearance. Who knows, maybe one day he'll appear in live action. Unlike the 4th Doctor volume, there are plenty of behind-the-scenes features. There's an introduction by the original editor, Des Skin, 2 pages about the launch of Doctor Who Weekly, and there's commentary on every story with quotes from the writers and artists. All in all, a very nice package, and I look forward to reading the 2nd volume, which apparently has stories by Alan Moore. So I'll be reviewing that soon. So thanks for watching. Press subscribe for more of my Doctor Who videos, and I'll see you next time.